Davis Younts. You can find his website at yountzlaw.com, representing men and women serving in our military. Good morning to you, Mr. Younts.
Hey, good morning, brother.
Praise be to God. You look great. I mean, I don't know, not everybody can see you because we're on radio, but you got a manly beard there, sir. I mean, every time I see
I'm
it.
trying to keep up with you.
Good. I don't know, man. Now it's reversed. Now I got to keep up with you. To keep up with the Joneses from Pennsylvania. Praise be to God. Let's talk about your clients' cases. But before you tell us where you're at now, how about you catch us up? What has been going on with the American military, religious exemptions, and your clients?
Well, the first thing I want to talk about is just a win that we had, a piece of great news in this battle that relates to a Navy officer. So I had the opportunity to represent Lieutenant Bill Mosley, 22 years of service in the United States Navy.
Wow.
A week ago Friday, we went to a officer separation board in San Diego, and we were able to present truth to that board. We were able to talk about faith, how his faith informed his decisions as an officer, and how he felt it was his obligation to stand up to an unlawful order. And we were successful. Praise God. Hearts and minds were opened, and these senior military officers looked at the evidence that was available and realized information they'd been given by the Navy just didn't make sense when you took the time to look at federal statutes and the case law. And we were able to break through. So they found that his decision to refuse getting the vaccine, refuse the order to get the vaccine, was not misconduct. And they recommended that he be retained in the United States Navy.
That's amazing. Praise be to God. But I would argue that the vast majority of his colleagues have not been so fortunate, many of which are now actually being separated from the military. Can you tell us, give us a sense of how many have applied in the military versus how many have been rejected?
So essentially, thousands have applied for religious accommodation, and all have been rejected except a very few that are already approved for separation dates. So there have been a very few, and we're talking, I think, less than 10 in the Air Force now, very, very few, maybe 2 or 3 in the Navy. Army is very, very similar. And again, anyone that's been approved for religious accommodation has been someone who already had an approved separation date. So whether it was a retirement, they were already getting out, they were ending their enlistment contract. So the only ones that have been approved, in my mind, and in most people that are fighting these cases' mind, have been approved for purposes of theater, right?
I did not know that. I did not.
That's right.
I've never known that. That's crazy. So I was thinking, wow, this is great. They've approved some, but not a single one is going to be staying in the military.
That's absolutely right. It has been just almost to try to, I think, strengthen their position in some of these federal cases and show, no, we're giving these proper and due consideration as required by the Constitution, as required by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. That's not what's happening. They're only approving those who are already getting out, already separating.
That's insane to me. So your client then is going to get to continue to serve?
That's absolutely right. The board recommended retention under the law, under due process, the way the Navy regulations work. He will be able to complete his current service, which is about 2 more years until he can retire as a lieutenant in the Navy.
Mr. Younts, do you think that this will become a precedent for other people who are potentially looking into going into the military and not wanting to get this COVID vaccine, which I believe now is still a requirement?
Right. It is absolutely still a requirement. The precedent here is interesting. This isn't an individual case, and it's actually not even a court martial. It was an administrative proceeding. But the precedent that was set is this was the first time we've seen senior Navy officers actually look at the law, take the time to understand the law, and rule in the favor of an individual military member, to understand why this is not a lawful order. And so the precedent that sets is boards will have to pay attention now. And the news that's been out there, even just coming on, talking to you guys and getting this news out there, educates people and gets military officers asking why. Why did this other board reach this determination? What did they see that's different from what the military has been telling us from the beginning?
And I'm going to ask a dumb question, but this works like precedent now? I mean, this can be cited and used to someone else's advantage?
That's absolutely right. We can use it in other boards to show, look, there was a board presented with very, very similar facts and evidence, and they reached a conclusion that this was not misconduct to refuse the vaccine. And so it does certainly help. It isn't binding on anyone else, but it's very, very helpful. And I kind of make a correlation to like a self-defense case. So if someone goes to trial and their defense is self-defense, they're acting in self-defense. It doesn't necessarily mean that another jury is going to find the same way in another case with similar facts, but it does help illustrate what the law, it educates people on the law, and it can have an impact.
So the world seems to have moved on for the most part from this pandemic, but the federal government's holding on to all of their emergency powers. And I guess this is what's making this continue to be an issue with the American military?
That's right. The American military is refusing, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon are refusing to consider natural immunity. They're refusing to look at transmission rates in the community, reinfection rates, all of those things. They're not considering any of those things, and they're continuing to push this mandate. And again, one of the issues is there is no FDA-approved vaccine available for military members. And that's shocking to people to hear that, because everybody goes, no. This was approved by the FDA. And this is critically important. And what we've learned is they're not producing it. So it's not available yet. It's still the emergency use authorization. Why does that matter so much to military members? Because in the past, and you probably remember something about the anthrax vaccine, right? There were issues with the anthrax vaccine. And so what happened was Congress changed the law. They made it clear the president has to sign a waiver before a military member can be forced to use a vaccine that's in this stage that these COVID vaccines are in. And that hasn't happened yet, right? That hasn't happened yet in this case. That's part of it. The other piece that we argued in this case, I think successfully, is under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, in order to be lawful, an order must be reasonably necessary, must be necessary for the military mission and military purpose. And we argued this is not anymore. Given the efficacy of natural immunity, what's going on with transmission rates, it doesn't make sense to order military members to receive this vaccine, particularly where it's going to violate their religious freedom. And there should be a burden on the government to prove it's necessary before we're going to do that.
And given that the vaccines that they do approve at the FDA all had something to do with aborted fetal tissues in either the research, development, or production, or what have you, many of us are like, we don't want anything to do with abortion. It's the evil. And yet the FDA hasn't approved vaccines that had nothing to do with, they could. It's within their power to do so. They exist, but they have not approved a single vaccine that has nothing to do with aborted fetal tissue. Why wouldn't they just do that? Any speculation there?
I don't know. I don't fully understand it. And obviously it's been something that I personally matters to me very much. And in my own faith, as well as my clients, I've been researching it since 2020. There were other vaccines available, other vaccines in development that were produced ethically without using aborted fetal cells and testing, development, or otherwise. But they have not been approved yet. They haven't been a priority. Those weren't the companies that won government contracts or were supported by the government. So it's a fascinating issue.
Follow the money. Follow the money. Hold that thought. We talked about this before. I served in the Marine Corps. I know you served as well. Thank you for your service, by the way. Our favorite saying was, you signed the mother bleeping contract. I mean, we joked about it all the time. And because we had this notion that we're basically indentured servants. We'd given over our rights and liberties in order to serve our country. And I remember getting all the vaccines at boot camp. I mean, I was getting shots in both arms at the same time. And, I didn't question. I didn't think about it. I wasn't considering it. But so what is the actual reality of a person who raises their right hand and makes that oath of allegiance? Are they indentured servants? Do they actually give up their rights?
They don't. And so one of the amazing things about the United States military, it just goes back to our heritage and history, is military officers swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution. So do enlisted members, but unique enlisted members, you remember, enlisted swear an oath to obey the orders of the officers above them. The officer's oath is actually slightly different. The highest allegiance in the officer's oath is to the Constitution. So military members do not give up their constitutional rights when they serve in the military. It would be absurd to think that they did. Now, there's certain times where freedom of speech and expression are limited in the military because of the nature of your service, but we don't give up our faith. We don't give up our religious freedom because we serve in the military. And the Religious Freedom Restoration Act makes that clear. It's binding on the federal government, which includes the military. And so the critical concept there is the military should be able to accommodate religious faith where it can without interfering with the mission. And that's really the issue. The Supreme Court has said the Religious Freedom Restoration Act makes it clear there has to be a compelling interest. It has to be necessary. There has to be no alternative. And that's really what so many of my clients, what I'm asking for is, given the reality of where we're at with the importance of natural immunity, given the waning transmission of the virus, given the fact that the vaccines don't prevent you from getting this disease, there just doesn't seem to be that necessity there. But importantly, this impacts my clients' religious faith, our opposition to abortion, our belief that life begins at conception. Is just critically undermined. I can't, consistent with my faith, receive this vaccine and support abortion.
You know, one of my questions is, how did we get here? How did the military, it's like we woke up and it's become totally woke and totally desensitized to this legal requirement they have to ensure that their members have these rights. And now these members have to fight for these rights. How did we get here?
My personal opinion as a man of faith is we have lost our way. There is no moral foundation. There's no biblical foundation. There's no faith-based foundation for our military anymore. So our military officers, many in leadership have just become bureaucrats. They've become political animals. They care more about preserving their position, their career, their retirement than they do the principles that our Constitution is founded on. I really think that's a huge part of it.
You know, let me tell you a quick story. I have a friend who went to the Naval Academy, and he was serving on board submarines. He told me that when he reported for duty to his very first sub in the fleet, he was standing in the hatch of the boat CO. I think his rank was commander, if I'm not mistaken. And the CO was sitting at his desk. And, you know, these are small rooms. These staterooms are small. They're not very big. So he's standing there and he's looking in the hatch, standing at attention, reporting for duty. And the CEO says, "Come in." And so he takes one step in, and on the bulkhead in front of him is this picture of the CO and his family, and it's a beautiful family photo as a family man. And he took notice of this because he is a faithful, practicing Catholic, and family matters to him. And so he thought this was a good sign. And then he was told to take a seat. The seat was to his left. He takes a left face, and he is bombarded with pornography hanging on the bulkhead. Mm. And the contrast and the dichotomy struck him like a 2x4 across the face. And he was like, he was awestruck. He wasn't quite sure how to handle this because of that family photo versus pornography. He told me that serving under that commander was difficult because every Sunday he would act like an assistant chaplain on the boat, and he would go through the entire boat and take down all the porn. But by that afternoon, the CO ordered the porn to be put back up every single Sunday, and that his leadership vision was that this was good for the men, good for the members on board the boat. And I suppose women too now are serving there. So I think at the heart, this is where our military is struggling. The leadership from top down has lost its sense of what it truly means to lead people. Would you say?
I would agree with that. I mean, that is something we're seeing repeatedly. My clients have seen repeatedly. These orders are coming down from the Pentagon. This fear of Christian faith in the military, the fear of expression of it in the military, what our chaplains are going through. But these orders are coming down, and the mid-level commanders aren't doing anything. I mean, how many times have my clients have I heard, even just dealing with this vaccine mandate, that they agree with us. Oh, we know this impacts your faith. We understand it. It doesn't make sense, but they don't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. Even JAGs, even attorneys, even chaplains, they don't do anything about it. Well, no one listens when I disagree. So I'm just going to keep doing my job. So that's what we need. We need a revival. We need people to return to their faith. They need to understand it, because without that moral foundation, that faith foundation in Christ, We shouldn't be surprised that our military just doesn't have a rudder to guide it in the right direction.
Stuart Schroeder, he dared to speak out and criticize senior command, and boy, that didn't go over well. I mean, he's out now, and thankfully he does have his benefits. He didn't get booted completely, but it was a pretty harrowing ride for him, I would imagine. What do you think about Stuart Schroeder's case?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a very difficult thing for him, and just a tremendous amount of understanding for where he's coming from. He led, men and women in combat, and people died because of decisions that were made that seem and feel like they were politically motivated, that they were arbitrary, and there weren't consequences. And again, a lot of my clients just see a correlation with the vaccine mandate with how we withdrew from Afghanistan. Why? Because military members weren't standing up and saying, we can't do this. We can't do this the way you're asking us to do this, or there isn't clear guidance. I mean, just look at the way equipment was handled in the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Some commanders destroyed the equipment they left behind, others didn't. You and I both know that's a clear indication they were not given clear guidance, and they didn't ask for clarification from senior leadership. So those are the things you see when military officers are not dedicated primarily to the mission, to leadership, and are afraid to ask the hard questions.
Yeah, that's a really awesome thing to point out for sure. There seems to be a duality there. I like that you pointed that out. I'm wondering, your clients, what kind of headspace are they in? A lot of these service members, the military is their life, and they value it very, very highly. Has that changed the way that they're perceiving the military because of these mandates and having to fight for not having to take a vaccine?
It has, and it's so difficult because many of my clients take Lieutenant Mosley, 22 years of service. He was enlisted. He transitioned to an officer, multiple deployments, combat deployments, amazing things that he's done in his career. And it's just such a difficult thing to deal with emotionally and mentally, to be committed to serving, to have been a phenomenal, a true hero, and then you're no longer useful because of your religious faith, because you're willing to take a stand for something that seems clear, seems right. And you're not even being given the time of day. You're just being disregarded, shoved aside, treated like a criminal. It's been very, very difficult. Unfortunately, we've seen people take their own life in response to this mandate because of these choices they face. So it does feel to many like a betrayal, because you're just trying to do the right thing. You're trying to ask the questions. You're trying to stand for faith, stand on your constitutional rights, advocate for others, and you're just pushed aside.
I don't have the statistics in front of me. I wish I should look this up. And what I'm curious about is like how Christianity fares in the U.S. military these days. We've had a chaplain issue now going on a while. And so it is a problem within the military. I mean, even going back to my own service, getting out in 1995, most of my friends definitely were agnostic at best, atheists at most. Alcoholics before the age of 21. I mean, we had major problems, lots of issues. What would you say to some young person who's considering the military today? Can you still recommend this? What advice do you give them?
The first question I always ask them is why. Why are you joining? Why are you going to serve? And if it relates to just the benefits or getting an education or anything else, I tell them don't do it. I think it has to be a very, very special calling for people of faith these days, because it is not an environment that I would want, certainly not my daughters, and if I had a son, that I would want my son serving in, unless I felt they truly, the hand of God was compelling them to do it. And that's very, very sad for me. I'm still appealing my own denial of my religious accommodation for my own career, but I've served for 2 decades. But I can't just recommend it the way I used to, not anymore.
It is hard, and that is a common story. When I meet people who've served in the military, who have kids that are considering it, this is the conversation we have. And now, this is the conclusion we're all coming to. But 10 years ago, it probably wasn't the same case. Many families were like, oh, yes, my son is going to go off to the military. And nowadays, we're all like, is this wise? Is this prudent? It feels like you're sending lambs to the slaughter.
Real quickly, we have just about 2 minutes left in our conversation, but I wanted to just ask, we recently have seen that people have been saying, and I don't know if this is true, and I'm curious if you know, that they have quietly in a lot of the military schools and in the U.S. military, they have pulled back on some of the woke material they're teaching. Is that true?
You got seconds.
I'm not sure that it is. That's not what I'm seeing. It has been pushed out so thoroughly, and the problem is even chaplains and JAGs are afraid to do or say anything that isn't consistent with the latest woke guidance that's come out. So it may not be as vocal as it was for a time. They're not as public with some of it, but it's absolutely a huge problem still. It remains a problem.
Yikes. Please, God, send us courageous and heroic leaders to lead us to truth instead of this craziness. But R. Davis Younts, YountsLaw.com, thank you for your time today. We're always grateful for you being on the program.
Thank you. God bless you.
All right, God bless you too. All right, join us in the second hour if you can. We have a lot more to conversate about, plus